I've not read as much Doctor Who as I would like, and when I do, it does tend to be novelisations rather than original stories. It might be because I have no imagination, but I think it's because of how short and accessible they are, and you get a lot of content for a very reasonable price. Every single classic Doctor Who story has been novelised in some way, with something like Evil of the Daleks even being novelised again by Fraser Hines in 2023. Some of them aren't the target novelisations that we know and love, but they have all been adapted into written word. I've read a small handful of these classic novelisations, and they can certainly range in quality. Also, let me preface this video by saying, as this is a review, everything here is just my opinion. You might see everything I say in a completely different way, or you might even agree with everything I say. Either way, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What I want to look at is the modern Who novelisations. As of the making of this video, there has been 20 modern Who novelisations, with Rose being one of the first 4 in April 2018, alongside The Christmas Invasion, The Day of the Doctor, and Twice Upon a Time. Since then, we get a handful of releases every few years. I will not be looking at the illustrated edition of this novel, or the additional short story Revenge of the Nestine, as these are adaptations and stories in their own right. As you can see here, Russell T Davies returns to novelise the now iconic 20-year-old story, long before there was any idea of him returning for the series. These novelisations can't really be separated by their TV counterparts when it comes to how I view them initially. When it will come for me to read The Crimson Horror, I'd be lying if I'd be going into it with a wholly open mind. That being said, as Rose is probably one of my favourites, I probably watched it more than any other story, I was definitely optimistic. There'll obviously be spoilers of the episode and the book, although I doubt you'd be here if you hadn't watched the first episode of Modern Who. So basically just spoilers for the book, more or less. As with all novelisations, it adapts the story further than what we already know. This is clearly shown right off the bat with a prologue on Wilson. Despite the fact that many of you probably don't remember who Wilson is in the episode, this was a pleasant introduction, although I did feel it unnecessarily delayed the introduction of Rose, the titular character. No major plot points have really been changed here, and the overall atmosphere of the story, especially regarding Rose's dull life, can definitely still be felt here. Mickey's life is actually expanded on quite a lot here, specifically in regards to his parents, his dad having left, and his mum having unfortunately ended her own life. Interestingly, Mickey's mum is stated to be alive in the episode, but this change does give Mickey's closeness to his gran and Rose a bit more substance. Mickey also doesn't even find out about the Doctor until they're all in the Nestine's lair, which makes sense on paper, as Rose might not be willing to really talk about the Doctor being involved in the centre of everything, but it makes it so Rose has to lie to Mickey about why she's going to see Clive, making it about like compensation or something, and I don't believe like Rose at this point in time would be lying to Mickey in such a large scale way. Speaking of Clive, there is a significant change to the stuff that he talks to Rose about. Instead of Clive's research being limited to just the 9th Doctor, it ranges from all the Doctors that had been introduced up to the point of the novelisation, as well as some extra ones just for this story. The illustrated edition gives a really good look at everything he shows Rose, but it's not a surprise that she would call him a nutter after everything he tells her, because it's definitely way too much. Clive's interest in the Doctor apparently stems from his dad being killed at the hands of a Dalek during the events of Remembrance of the Daleks. Although Clive's demise is more or less the same, his wife for some reason decides to exact revenge on the Doctor, because apparently it's the Doctor's fault. I mean, it is the Doctor's fault because death is his constant companion, but I don't think she would have made that connection. I'm sure there's a story in there somewhere for Big Finish to pick up for God. I would listen to it if I had the money. Aspects of the end of the world are also introduced in this book. Whereas the Doctor doesn't talk to Rose about the Time War until the end of their second story, here he drops minor references of the war throughout, and more specifically mentions it in regards to how the Nestine consciousness ended up on Earth. The Autons also have a little bit of an upgrade. It's very similar to the Pandorica Open with lifelike Autons, but they make it so the living statues that you see on like streets, you just kind of stand still, painted in silver or like a mime or something like that, are also Autons. So it kind of has that eerie sense of the fact that Autons could be anywhere. A lot like Weeping Angels, you know how Blink ends or the Angels Take Manhattan shows, like anything, any statue can be a weeping angel. In this case, any living statue or any of those buskers on the street could be an auton. It doesn't sound as interesting, but I mean, they could be. This thought of plastics being closely involved within our lives is explored a little bit more when Russell T Davies makes it so the Nestine can literally control people due to the microplastics in their body, which, I mean, I see the point of why they're doing it, and he got the point across, but it seemed a bit kind of wacky. This may not sound particularly long, but the Nestine's invasion is spread across 11 whole pages. And while it gives some interesting views on the attacks, it takes attention away from Rose and the Doctor in the Nestine's lair. Every time it cuts to a different person or group of people experiencing the Nestine's invasion, I'm just left wondering what the hell the Doctor and Rose are doing, whether they're just waiting there until it's their turn. Whereas, you know, in the episode, the pacing is a lot easier to kind of cut back and forth between the invasion of Jackie, of Clive, and just then cutting back to Rose and the Doctor, and how they're actually working in time with the invasion to try and stop it. Within the invasion stuff, though, there is quite a fun cameo from Donna just missing everything that's going on. Those 11 pages really took me out of the story progression, and there was only one other moment that did that, which was when Rose was pointing out the London Eye to the Doctor as being the Nestine's transmitter. It's a really good piece of low-key comedy in the episode, but when they have to describe the joke in the book, it doesn't really come across as well. Right, said Rose, determined to be useful. Tell me what it looks like. He stood with his back to the river. Huge, circular metal, like a dish, like a wheel, radial, close to where we're standing. Doctor, she said, and pointed behind him. He turned around. He saw the city, the river, the sky. He turned back to Rose, puzzled. What? Doctor, she said, and pointed again. He turned to look. River, city, sky. Turned to Rose. What? You idiot, she said, and pointed once more. He looked again. River, city, sky, and the London Eye. The great big circular metal radial London Eye and the world's biggest Ferris wheel, standing over the Thames in all its floodlit glory. He turned back to Rose with a grin. Fantastic, he said. So you still get the nice fantastic at the end, but just in the episode you get Billy Piper with these snarky nods behind the Doctor, and the kind of the 1-2 between them works a lot better without having to explain the joke, just word for word. And Rose is literally pointing behind the Doctor, like it's got to be so much more obvious. All of these somewhat major, but mostly minor changes don't really amount to much. I mean, there's only so much you can do when adapting such an iconic story. So I don't think this is really anything special. The alterations seem either unnecessary or unimportant, but they don't impact the core familial atmosphere of this story. Rose is still a character that is easy to understand and empathise with, and the Doctor clearly makes a massive impact to her life. I would still recommend this book to anyone interested. Reading about Mickey's life and the fun references sprinkled throughout are actually quite appealing. So I'm happy to give this novelisation a 6.5 out of 10. Not a particularly astonishing start to modern Who novelisations. It might have been my optimism, but I think my familiarity with the original story meant that simply reading it just didn't feel the same. However, rest assured, the next one is phenomenal. Be sure to catch my next video soon on Robert Shearman's Dalek novelisation.